politics, and faith in public life. I'm assuming out of these three categories, just knowing a little bit of your background, that faith in public life is that the one that you gravitate to the most?
Well, that's certainly kind of yeah, there's a lot in my background that kind of, orients me in that direction, although with the humanities as well. But
Mhm.
I think it's fair to say, especially this year, we'll be probably focusing more on that because there's an acute and pressing need to do so.
Which leads, of course, to the question, how do we engage? I mean, that's a huge question, I know. But of course, we see it becoming more and more polarized depending on what your media diet is in some respect that's influencing us to the left or to the right. How do you keep going on in the middle of this culture, which seems so polarized? And I'm not talking just about polarized between left and right. I'm talking about within the church itself.
Yeah.
That becomes so often. We've had Russell Moore and Albert Mohler on the show, and they differ very widely. Same with Pete Wehner. These are all Christian people that disagree very much with where we need to go within the political sphere. How do you keep a right focus and in engaging in that way?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is a big question, Travis. And we could be
We had
talking
all
for
the time in the world.
we could be talking for hours about that. Um, this is not going to be a comprehensive answer, but I think one really important place to start is by paying attention to ways and means and not just ends. And that when we are called to follow Christ, we're called to follow, we're called to follow his way of doing things, to love him, but also to emulate him. And there's a how that is so often, I think, disregarded or even, kind of derided. That you hear a lot of rhetoric and writing about how these are such desperate times, and the times are so dire that really it's time to panic. It's time to throw all constraint to the wind. It's do or die. It's Flight 93. Everything's going down. All bets are off. And really, it's a fear mongering to encourage us to all essentially become little Machiavellis who believe that the end justifies the any means. And that's actually completely counter to kind of the most basic sort of discipleship instructions that Christ gives us. I mean, he calls us to come and follow him, to learn his ways, to emulate them, to follow in his footsteps. And so when one kind of engages politics or the public or the culture or whatever with an eye towards means as well as ends, you start recognizing that the people that you are disagreeing with or fighting against, um, presumably these are your neighbors and not just kind of disembodied enemies to be vanquished. These are neighbors that you're called to love. I mean, we're called to love our enemies as well, but let's start with our neighbors. This is usually someone who lives down the street who thinks differently than you on a different issue, but but making them into an abstraction to be vanquished, that's often valorized as like a sign of courage or, being sold out. But it's actually counter to the way Christ engaged with others. So I think that's a really important place to start is how we do what we're doing, how we see the people that we are engaging with or arguing with or whatever it is. And are we doing it in a way that Christ would engage? In one of the readings that we put out, it's called Politics, Morality, and Civility, and it draws on the story of Václav Havel, who had a very different approach to becoming president of the Czech Republic back in the early 90s. And at the time, the Czech Republic had deep polarization, lots of corruption. There were certain parallels kind of where we are now. And what he did is he actually took much of the summer off for reflection, which is certainly rather countercultural. But he
Yeah.
wrote a series of letters to his wife. And one of them, he talks about how he has come to the conclusion in the course of his reflection that the only way to pursue justice and mercy and humanity and flourishing is justly and mercifully and humanely, and with an eye towards the flourishing of others. Like that, in essence, if our ways and means contradict our ends, we're never going to reach the ends that we desire. So I think a place to start is by following the way, that Jesus showed us.